take us through your thought process of why you decided not to wear a mask?
I had one on before. I wore one in this back area, but I didn't want to give the press the pleasure of seeing it. I was given a choice, and I had one on in an area where they preferred it, so I put it on, and it was very nice. It looked very nice, but they said not necessary.
What about the example that it would set for other Americans?
Well, I think it sets an example. I think it sets an example both ways.
President Trump at a Ford plant in Michigan this week, highlighting the cultural and political divide over mask wearing and so many other restrictions.
Does the President support the guidelines? Does he think Americans should follow those guidelines, or should they be following the initial guidelines that you rolled out here from the podium?
So the President's been very clear. He supports the reopening of America guidelines. The CDC guidelines are in concert with those guidelines. He wants to safely reopen this country. It's very important we do so, and it's good to see that most states, I think basically all of them, have plans at this point to reopen, and we're starting to see the safe reopening of several states and Americans getting back to work.
Let me just get your reaction to something. We just got moments ago a statement from the American Nurses Association which says, quote, "The American Nurses Association has not received reports from nurses or other frontline healthcare workers utilizing hydroxychloroquine as a preventative treatment for COVID-19. Why does the President continue to say that many or thousands of frontline workers are using it as a prophylactic?
Well, there is, at Henry Ford Hospital is doing a study on this now where 3,000 frontline workers will be taking hydroxychloroquine to look at its use as a prophylaxis. I believe there's a few hundred or 190 workers in Tampa General Hospital. So this is being used by some. And one thing I want to note with regard to hydroxychloroquine, because I think it's very important that we're as accurate as we can be with our reporting on this. Hydroxychloroquine has been a drug that has been in use for 65 years for lupus, arthritis, and malaria. It has a very good safety profile, but as with any drug and as with any prescription, it should be given by a doctor to a patient in that context. So no one should be taking this without a prescription from their doctor. But that being said, I've seen a lot of apoplectic coverage of hydroxychloroquine. You had Jimmy Kimmel saying the president's, quote, trying to kill himself by taking it. You had Joe Scarborough saying, quote, this will kill you. Neil Cavuto saying, what have you got to lose? One thing you have to lose are lives. And you had Chris Cuomo saying the president knows that hydroxychloroquine is not supported by science. He knows it has been flagged by his own people, and he's using it. Well, Cuomo mocked the president for this. And interestingly, I found this out just before coming here. Hydroxychloroquine, of course, is an FDA-approved medication with a long proven track record for safety. And it turns out that Chris Cuomo took a less safe version of it called quinine, which the FDA removed from the market in 2006 because of its serious side effects, including death. So really interesting to have that criticism of the president. And on that note to Chris Cuomo, I'd like to redirect him to his brother, the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, who has several on-the-record statements about hydroxychloroquine, saying, I'm an optimist, I'm hopeful about the drug, and that's why we'll try it here in New York as soon as we get it. There has been anecdotal evidence that it's promising, that's why we're going ahead, and I have about 8 other quotes from Governor Cuomo, should any of you have interest in that.
You just cited our studies, though. They're trials that are in their early phases. Do you have any evidence that thousands of frontline workers are currently using it because they believe it actually will prevent them from getting COVID-19?
The FDA has approved this for off-label use. You know, this president's a big believer in right-to-try legislation. People who are in their last... There are several studies that have been brought that the president has actually mentioned that I'd refer you to. There was one out of France, a French study involving more than 1,000 patients that found that the vast majority had, quote, good clinical outcomes, and by the vast majority, that was more than 90%. There was an Italian study of more than 65,000 patients that demonstrated only 20 tested positive of those who were taking it prophylactically, and a South Korea study as well. So there are several studies, and if you're someone out there and this is a safe drug to use, and your doctor, importantly to underscore that, and your doctor prescribes it for your use as a prophylaxis or after coming into contact with COVID, then it's something you should take if it's prescribed by the doctor, and that's your personal medical choice.
And as I was thinking about it this week, I'm watching him and I'm thinking, he is becoming FDR. He's a guy who's not freaking out, but he's got it under control. Everybody else might be freaking out, but he's not. and he's setting the right tone for the nation. I'm just so impressed. So impressed.
Yeah, and I've been very impressed with him, and this is the guy that I've known him to be always, because I've got to spend a considerable amount of time with him privately, and this is who he is. He commands the room. I mean, he really, there's something about him where he truly is the boss, and he listens, he knows his shortcomings, meaning that he's not going to pretend he's a medical expert, but you can guarantee he's going to surround himself with the greatest medical experts in the world to get them to make him understand so they can shoot straight. And give him something that he can go in front of the nation and say, here's what we're going to do. I think he's one of those people that actually thrives under pressure. I'm a bit like that too, right? When the pressure's really on, the president just glides. He just turns on, and America is being able to see that. So again, if there's any silver lining in all of this, it's the fact that a lot of people who never saw what I saw in Donald Trump are finally seeing it now. They're seeing that he is a leader. He didn't come packaged pretty like Barack Obama did. Well, foremost, and I'm going to be critical of the left and the right here, foremost, it was just realizing how easy it was for people to just say, okay, take away all of our rights because we're fearful. And people had this argument to me over and over again that, well, it's not going to lead to tyranny because we have President Trump in office. And of course, we all love and know President Trump would never take advantage. But people are not understanding the danger of this precedent. People are not understanding that Donald Trump is not going to be president forever, right? So imagine a world in which this was happening under a President Bernie Sanders, right? A person that is advocating for socialism, a person that is advocating for the government to have this power on a routine basis. This is what I've been super fearful about, and I've been very vocally against this. And so I'm seeing this play out, and then I'm realizing suddenly that the media is being dishonest, and they're not answering the questions as to why Sweden's death rate is so low and Japan's death rate is so low. And the answer is because they don't calculate the death rates the same way. Our death toll is being calculated by public health offices. The state public health offices are telling us how many people are dying, and they're getting those numbers directly from the hospital. These are not coming from the medical examiner, right? So they're saying if it could have contributed, the CDC says, you write down that this person died of coronavirus. There was a man recently who was in hospice. He was already in hospice. So he was going to die, obviously, very soon. And they said that while in hospice, he acquired coronavirus. And they're now contributing that to be a factor in his death, so he counts towards the death toll. In Connecticut, you'll see that I recently broke the story that the governor came out and said they had the first infant death. Turns out that infant was actually accidentally smothered by its own caretaker. It had nothing to do with COVID-19, but because of the mandatory post-mortem testing, people that are not dying of COVID-19 are being counted towards the death toll. And so the fact that so many people were afraid to tiptoe around this, or to say this, because, once everyone gets afraid and the world is scared, anything that you say that goes against the narrative, they try to paint you like a monster. Well, fortunately for me, they've painted me as a monster for the last 3 years, so I've never been afraid of what the media is going to say. My bigger fear is to arrive very suddenly into a climate and a country that has set a precedent for the government to be able to strip all of our powers overnight. That's my bigger fear.
So we have to talk about both of these issues because these are exactly the ones that I'm most concerned with based upon the research I did myself this weekend. We'll talk about how the deaths are being measured or how they're being categorized in the next segment. But can I just stay with this first issue for the next 2 minutes we have with Candace Owens? Please follow her at Real Candace Owens. Aren't you shocked that in America, the land of the free, the brave, those that raised that flag on Iwo Jima, that it was so easy to take control and to shut down all our businesses? Doesn't that shock you, Candace?
It shocks me and it scares me, and it should really make everybody fearful, because if it can happen in America, I mean, we really are the last stand for liberty and for freedom. And people that are willing to give up their freedoms that easily deserve to be taken over. I'm spinning a quote that was said long ago.
Yes.
If you're so willing to give your freedoms up, then you don't deserve to have freedom. And we need more warriors. We need more people that are willing to speak out and say this is very dangerous. You have to think beyond your present fears. because when people can figure out what you're fearful of, they will manipulate you and they will control you.
It is a sad truth. We're not saying anything. We're not qualifying the severity of the situation. We'll talk about the problems with how things have been counted and categorized in the next segment. But the fact that this nation, the most powerful nation in the world, the greatest nation in the world, the nation with the largest economy, not only in the world, but the largest economy in our history before the government shutdown of our businesses, could so effectively and so rapidly end up the way it has ended up is very disturbing. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we are thankful that Donald Trump is our president and that people like Candace Owens aren't just out there, but are going to run for public office.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to begin by detailing the historic private-public partnership effort launched by the Trump administration to combat the coronavirus. As both a businessman and as president, you'll all remember then candidate Donald Trump, now President Donald Trump, being adamant about bringing manufacturing jobs back to America. President Obama and the Democrats had given up on manufacturing with President Obama's erroneously prediction that Trump would need a magic wand in order to bring back American jobs. Not so. The reality is President Trump revived manufacturing in this country, and he tore up disastrous trade deals that hemorrhaged American jobs, like NAFTA and like the plan that was in work, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Instead, he put in place better trade deals to bring back American jobs and to bring back American manufacturing. And in the battle against the invisible enemy, President Trump took action to shore up our domestic supply chains in order to deliver the necessary PPE and other medical equipment to the states. Speaker Pelosi and House Democrats are currently promoting a $3 trillion liberal wish list among a litany of Democrat priorities immaterial to the coronavirus crisis are embedded in this, and one would require the president to appoint a, quote, medical supplies response coordinator who would, quote, serve as the point of contact for the healthcare system, supply chain officials, and the states on medical supplies. I'm happy to report this individual already exists. This bill ignores reality because the medical supplies official is in existence. He's been working on this since March to deliver to date over more than 1 billion, I should say, pieces of PPE to countries and hospitals across the country. Since March 29th, Rear Admiral John Plavchek, Vice Director for Logistics for the Joint Chiefs, has been on the job as the head of FEMA's Supply Chain Stabilization Task Force. This is a historic partnership with the private sector, and under the leadership of President Trump, FEMA directed the greatest mobilization of the private sector since World War II. Rear Admiral Plavchek and FEMA quickly realized the power of the private sector in addressing the coronavirus, recognizing that the 6 largest private sector medical distributors would have the ability to source, procure, manufacture, and deliver as many as 1 billion pieces of PPE in a single week. That is extraordinary volume by our private sector. And at the direction of President Trump, Rear Admiral Plavchek and FEMA were able to harness this power. Every day at 9 a.m., Rear Admiral Plavchek's team huddles with these 6 large private sector medical distributors, and together they review data compiled by Dr. Birx as well as information provided by the CDC to set priorities and ensure sufficient levels of supplies go down not just to the county level, but to the hospital level. After focusing geographically, Rear Admiral Plavchek and his team orients the data to set point-of-care distribution priorities for public hospitals, VA and DoD facilities, private hospitals, nursing homes, acute care clinics, first responders, and labs. In just 2.5 weeks, Rear Admiral Plavchek and his team were able to combine data streams, utilize supply chain visualization tools from DoD, and input data into the cloud. This system is now available to generate reports for governors showing what their state received from the federal government and commercial partners all the way down to the hospital level, as I noted. And thanks to President Trump and his administration, governors now have visibility as to where their supplies are sent and where they're received. And from March 1st through May 10th, this public-private partnership has led to the delivery, and these are extraordinary numbers, of over 113 million N95 respirator masks, nearly 500 million surgical masks, nearly 18 million face shields, and over 12 billion gloves. That is a lot of PPE, and we thank our private sector partners for engaging in this effort with us. Also, I just wanted to note that earlier today, the President held an hour-long call with thousands of Hispanic community, business, and faith leaders across the country. He recognized the many contributions of the Hispanic community to our country and addressed important issues like how to reopen their businesses and build the greatest economy in history again.